He hath swallowed me up like a dragon. And from Micah 1 verse 8, I will make a wailing like the dragons. There are two references to flying serpents found in the Bible. Isaiah 14:29 says, For out of the serpent's root shall come forth the cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. And Isaiah 30 verse 6 says, The burden of beasts of the south, into the land of trouble and anguish, from whence come the young and old lion, the viper, and the fiery flying serpent. Notice here, it distinguishes between the viper, which is a venomous snake, and the fiery flying serpent, which is some sort of fiery reptile that had the capability of flight. 5 times is the fiery serpent mentioned in the scriptures. 2 references are Numbers 21:6 and Deuteronomy 8:15. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Who led thee through the great and terrible wilderness, wherein were fiery serpents, and scorpions, and drought, and where there was no water. Leviathan, which is mentioned 4 times in the Bible, seems to be a very large and fierce creature, which was probably water-dwelling. Job 41 says this about Leviathan, Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which lettest down? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are his pride. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. Upon the earth there is not his like. The King James Bible mentions the cockatrice 5 times. Early English Bibles used the word cockatrice when they translated from Hebrew. The Hebrew word for cockatrice actually meant viper or horned serpent. As with any of these rare reptile creatures, much mythology and lore developed around them over time. Here is what the Bible says about the cockatrice. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. Jeremiah 8 verse 17 says, For behold, I will send serpents, cockatrices among you, which will not be charmed, they shall bite you, saith the Lord. And the final word that we find in the Bible that gives reference to the dinosaurs is behemoth. Behemoth is mentioned only once in the Bible, in the book of Job, which was written about 3,500 years ago. The description that it gives is very detailed, and when compared to known animals, reveals some interesting results. The book of Job is about a good and just man who lost everything, including his family, his health, and all his possessions. Just about the only thing he had left was his life. In the process of contemplating all that had happened to him, and being somewhat troubled about his situation, he questions God about his purposes in dealing with Job. God replies to Job, and in part of his reply we find this fascinating statement. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. The Hebrew word behemoth means large quadruped. So this is a very large, 4-legged animal that eats grass like an ox. The passage continues, Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. This creature is extremely strong, and it has a large belly. Some scholars say this creature is an elephant or a hippopotamus because of the above descriptions. Let's take a closer look. An elephant has a big belly. A hippopotamus has a big belly, but the class of dinosaurs called sauropods have the biggest bellies of all. The passage continues, He moveth his tail like a cedar, the sinews of his stones are wrapped together. Many Bible translations say, He moveth his tail like a cedar, the sinews of his thighs are tightly knit together. Now compare. Is this like a cedar? What about this? Nope, not even close. No other animal around today has a tail like a cedar tree. This most likely was the creature that God was referring to in his encounter with Job. Now that's like a cedar. Here's the rest of the passage. His bones are as strong as brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. This sounds like a very big, very tough creature, which was the chief of all God's creatures. So here we are, back to this guy. The elephant and the hippo don't even come close to being the chief of God's creatures. Reading on, it says, "Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. He lieth under the shady trees, in the covert of the reed and fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadow. The willows of the brook compass him about." It sounds like he lives in the swamps, which are fens. "Behold, he drinketh up a river, and hasteneth not. He trusteth that he can draw up the Jordan into his mouth." So here we have an extremely large animal that eats grass like an ox, has a huge tail that looks like a cedar tree, lives in the swamps, and is so big that it can take up massive amounts of water in its mouth. There is no other animal that fits all the descriptions given here other than a dinosaur like the Diplodocus or Brachiosaurus. In this video, you've been shown a portion of the historical, archaeological, and biblical evidence that dinosaurs have always existed with man. There are many questions you may have. The answers to our questions are out there. We just need to open our eyes and go find them. Now the Bible says that Noah built an ark for the saving of his family from the judgment to come. Noah believed what God said about the coming flood and built the ark. The judgment came, and as a result of man's violence and wickedness, everything was destroyed except for those in the ark. There is another judgment coming. The Bible says, "It is appointed unto a man once to die, but after this the judgment." In the book of Revelation chapter 20, we find a description of what the judgment of all mankind will be like. "And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whoever's name was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire." Do you know if your name is written in the book of life? Let's find out. The 10 Commandments are part of the standard for which mankind will be judged at the last judgment. Let's examine them for a moment.